Hi, I have for you one of the most amazing true stories of the 20th century. Do you believe in miracles? Then listen to this Sinai spy story and then tell me what you think. Chariot parts from Pharaoh's lost army had at last been found on the floor of the Gulf of Aqaba. Now Ron Wyatt knew that the legendary Mount Sinai had to be across the Gulf in Saudi Arabia. The biblical account said that the Hebrews arrived at Mount Sinai after they crossed the sea, and that they met God at Mount Sinai. And God came down in a flash of fire, and there he spoke with his own voice until the earth shook, and he wrote on tables of stone the 10 Commandments. Moses brought these down from the mountain, and as Moses descended, he noticed that the Israelites had already forgotten the wonderful miracles of God in delivering them from the Egyptians. And here they were worshipping an Egyptian golden calf. In great disappointment and anger, Moses threw down the original 10 Commandments and broke them. And God eventually had to write another set. In this area also there was another great miracle in which Moses was told to raise his rod, and just as the sea had once parted a few weeks earlier, now the rock split open and water came out in the desert. This was the setting for many wonderful events. Ron tried hard to get into Saudi Arabia. After 4.5 years of repeated attempts to get a visa, he decided to investigate the area anyway. Little did he dream what lay ahead for him and his 2 teenage sons, Danny and Ronnie. I should mention, friends, that it is the next to impossible to get into Saudi Arabia. The Saudis do not want tourists. They have all the money in the world, and they do not want their Muslim population, especially the women, exposed to Western civilization. The only way to get into is to obtain work in the kingdom, and that requires an invitation from a Saudi citizen. Ron confided his plans to 2 trusted friends. One of these was the astronaut Colonel James Irwin. He asked James, "If you do not hear from me within 2 weeks, you will know we're in trouble. So please, will you do what you can to help us with your influence in various embassies around the world?" He also confided his plan to another man whom we shall not name, and we'll mention that later. They crossed from Jordan through the mountains. They had hired small vehicles and tramped into the area they suspected held the clues. What they found in the desert of northwest Saudi Arabia was mind-boggling. But later, as they attempted to leave the country, they were arrested. They were taken to a jail in Haji, near the border. There they were charged with espionage. They found themselves in a prison cell with mattresses stained with urine and human excrement. Cockroaches were running over the floor. After 2 weeks, Jim Irwin was worried. He started putting pressure on friends in high places in countries like Holland, Jordan, Iraq, and other countries. These in turn rang the Saudi Arabian leaders, and the word came down from the King of Saudi Arabia. Those 3 men in the jail in Haji put the carpet in their cell. The jailers were astonished when the carpet arrived to be put in the cell. One of them commented to Ron, "We've never known anyone with so many important friends." Of course, these weren't Ron's friends, they were Jim's friends, but Ron received the benefit of it. Each day, Ron and the boys were separately interrogated. They told the story of their search and their belief that Jebel el-Lawz was Mount Sinai of both the Bible and the Quran. And one Saudi official, Abu Khaled, sent men out to check whether any archaeological evidence was actually there. The men went looking down here and came back with a negative report, which was sent to the king. However, among the interrogators were some who believed the man's story. Because espionage is such a serious charge, they decided to check out every detail of Ron's account. 3 of them flew with him out in a helicopter to the alleged crossing spot, the beach opposite Nuweiba. And there they found Solomon's column commemorating the miracle of the Red Sea crossing. Here was concrete archaeological evidence that could not be ignored. Friends, the Saudis took many photographs of this. Nobody in Arabia had known about this column, since it stood in an extremely remote, uninhabited area. However, the discovery did not ensure their release. Eventually, young Ronnie began to crack. "I just cannot stand any more of this," he cried. "I'm going to make a dash for it." "No," said Ron, "it's almost certain death if you try. There's a guard outside with a gun." "I must take that chance," replied Ronnie. "This is more than I can bear." "OK," said Ron, "but we need to formulate a plan of escape together." So each day the men received a refuge bag from the guards. They now began to hide one bag now and again until they had 6 bags hidden under the carpet. They had decided to blow them up and use them as airbags under their armpits when they escaped to the sea. And as you probably saw from the map, the prison was close to the seashore. They decided it would be easier to attempt their escape when the Muslim holy day began on a Thursday night. They'd have to get past 2 keepers. At that time the guard was being changed. Security would be more relaxed at that time on Thursday night. Thursday arrived and there arose a problem. One of the guards, a man named Ali, had shown them extreme kindness through their ordeal. They'd grown fond of him. Tonight was his shift. If they escaped while he was on duty, it was certain that Ali himself would be shot. They must wait. The next week dragged by. It was Wednesday morning, the day before their next escape attempt. Footsteps approached their cell. An official greeted them. "Halas," he said, which means finished. "You are cleared. You will be turned over to the Jordanian government." Ron hardly dared ask. After 75 days, just to be alive and free was wonderful. It was precious. "No," said the official, "none of your film will be returned to you. We're confiscating it." So for all their troubles, they would have no evidence, no pictures of the true Mount Sinai. And then in Jordan they were held for another 3 days until the red tape was cleared. Only then did they learn that the second friend whom they had confided their trip to, whom we shall not name, had rung up the Saudi embassy and told them that the Wyatts were Israeli spies. Now they realised that Ron and his sons were not spies. The Saudis were very angry at this false accusation. It could have led to serious political consequences had they executed them. They now wanted to help Ron prosecute this man, but Ron declined. He just wanted to go home. Back in the USA, this event made nationwide news, not just in the newspapers, but also on television. Ron's frustration at getting so close, yet coming out with no evidence, was intense. He felt certain he would never get back. Not long after this, Ron received a phone call from Samram al-Matari, a close relative of the Saudi king. He had heard of the Mount Sinai saga from several of Ron's captors. This prince lived in Tabuk, just 2 hours from the mountain. Ron and he could go back there, he said. "Ever since I heard about this mountain," Samran said, "I can't sleep, I can't eat. In fact, I cannot concentrate on anything, Mr. Wyatt. I have to see this for myself. I want you to help me." Soon Samran was on a plane to the US to meet Ron. For several days they discussed the matter. "I'm going to get you back into my country," Samran said. "Legally this time, Mr. Wyatt." "Why are you so interested in this mountain?" Ron asked him. And Samran replied, "I want to do something for my God. After all, Mount Sinai is a very important holy site for Muslims too. And honestly, Mr. Wyatt, the area of Jebel El Lawz is so vast, I need you to find the exact spot." So on March the 31st, 1985, a contract was drawn up between Samran el-Motare, David Fasshold, who was there at the time with Ron, and Ron himself. Now, for a foreigner to enter Saudi Arabia, he must have a valid business agreement with a citizen of that kingdom. Then they flew from the United States to Tabuk in Saudi Arabia. With Ron giving instructions, they headed for the direction of Jebel El Lawz. After making some wrong turns, they became confused and decided to take a break. Soon a Bedouin appeared. "Can you direct us to Jebel El Lawz?" asked the prince. David recalls the Bedouin's reply, "Jebel Musa Hena." This means Moses' mountain is here. To think that local tradition recognised this as the correct place. Charged with renewed vigour, they now explored the whole area. Then the prince led them to Haji for the night. This was closer than driving all the way back to Tabuk, but Ron was nervous. It was in Haji that he had been imprisoned for 3 months. So early in the morning, they piled into the car and they headed towards Samran's house in Tabuk, a 3 or 4 hour trip. Soon after leaving Haji, however, they noticed a big black Mercedes was following them. An hour or so later, its occupants suddenly motioned them to pull over. They were escorted to a building on the desert highway. It was the local police office. Inside, they were told that the interrogation team from Haji, which had questioned Ron and the boys when they were in jail, now planned to meet with them out at Jebel El Lawz and see the so-called evidence for themselves. The next day they headed out into the region, and there was the interrogation team headed by Abu Khaled meeting them at the roadside. "We're splitting you up," they said to Ron. So Ron and Dave were piled into 2 separate jeeps, and as they travelled, officials in each vehicle questioned them both intensely. They appeared to believe that the men were there looking for treasure rather than for archaeological finds. They arrived at the site, and Ron, Dave and Samran showed them the altar with the Egyptian-style petroglyphs of cows and bulls. They showed them the altar at the base of the mountain, the tops of the 18-foot diameter columns erected 5 feet apart that had been built by Moses and mentioned in the book of Exodus. They showed them the marble columns and so on. All of those archaeological clues that are given in the book of Exodus were here, right around the mountain, about 20 of them. The interrogation team was shocked but pleased. All pleased except for one man, this man, Abu Khaled. It was he who had sent the previous report to the king that his men had found absolutely nothing there. Yet now he saw for himself that the entire area was full of archaeological evidence. Friends, in Saudi Arabia, an inaccurate report sent to the king is considered the same as lying to the king. And lying to the king is punishable by death. Abu Khaled seemed to be awfully unhappy. So compelling were the evidences, however, that after a few days an archaeologist was flown in from Riyadh University. As they showed the evidences, the archaeologist was excited. He told them that this style of petroglyph was found nowhere else in Saudi Arabia. "This is a major discovery," he exclaimed. "This is Egyptian. We've found it nowhere but here." And finally, back at the prince's office in Tabuk, the interrogation team continued plying Ron and Dave with questions. "Why," one of the men asked Ron, through an interpreter, "why would Musa," that's Moses, "why would Musa bring the people to this isolated and undesirable spot when there were so many better locations in the area?" And Ron replied simply, "Well, Moses was following the cloud, which led them there." "That's not in the Quran," was the hot response. Actually, one of the imams said this in Arabic. Now, having read through the Quran, Ron knew that it did say this, but he knew it would be unwise to contradict this man. So he recited something he'd seen on an Arabic TV program, the imam he had seen, which was shown as saying every true Muslim believes every true prophet. If he doesn't believe every true prophet, he's not a true Muslim. Ron paused and then he asked, Was not Moses a prophet? Was not Musa a prophet? Immediately all of the men began nodding their heads and trying to out-yes one another. But friends, this is the strange part. All of those men answered before Ron's words were interpreted to them. Beyond any doubt, they all heard Ron in Arabic, even though Ron, who knew virtually no Arabic, said it in English. And add to this something else. When Ron watched that Imam on TV reading from the Quran, he heard him in English and assumed the Imam had been speaking in English. He was later told that to read the Quran in English is against Muslim law. The Imam had been speaking in Arabic, yet Ron understood it. Now catch this. The Saudis at that meeting all realised with shock that they had understood Ron when he answered them, quoting from the Quran. Could there be any doubt that Ron had received divine assistance? In Mark 13:9, Jesus predicted, "They shall deliver you up to councils, but take no thought beforehand what you shall speak. Whatever shall be given you in that hour, that speak, for it is not you that will speak, but the Holy Spirit." So the interrogation ended. The Saudis were convinced as to the authenticity of Jebel el-Lawz. It was the true holy mountain of God. However, Dave's video was confiscated along with their developed photographs, and Abu Khalid's men said, "You are to forget that you ever came here. We don't want to read about this in a book or see it in a movie." So once again, Ron would leave Arabia without the evidence he so desperately desired. This was not a subject the Saudis wanted made public. This project is too large, Ron told a friend. Look, it's too large to undertake on my own. I must share it with somebody. And this is where the astronaut friend James Irwin came in. Jim not only had connections, he was also a man of utmost integrity and a Christian gentleman. Ron arranged a meeting with several people from Jim's high flight crew in Dallas, Texas. Verbally, he shared the evidence for the real Mount Sinai. This included how to get there and an invitation to join him. James Irwin wrote to the Kingdom of Saudi's General Department of Antiquities and Museums in Riyadh. He described the site and Ron's involvement and requested permission for Ron to excavate the site. On October the 15th, 1986, Dr. Abdullah H. Mari, Assistant to the Minister for Antiquities and Museum Affairs, wrote a polite letter of refusal. Then, in the July 1988 edition of Jim Irwin's High Flight Foundation newsletter, this announcement was made. Great news! We strongly feel that the real Mount Sinai has been discovered. Larry Williams and I, Bob Kernock, have taken 2 trips to Saudi Arabia and travelled to Jebel el-Lawz. And later, Larry Williams published a book, The Mountain of Moses, in which he documents how he and Bob Kernock, Vice President of Jim Irwin's High Flight, sneaked into Saudi Arabia and discovered the real Mount Sinai. The sad thing was that these men chose not to share their photographs with Ron after he had first gone to them. They had contacted Dave Fassold and got the precise information which allowed them to make their discovery. At least people would learn the truth of the real site. Now occurred the most amazing development in this whole drama. At this point, we cannot give the actual names of some of the individuals involved, but everything has been documented by all persons involved, and their video testimony will eventually be made public when it is safe to do so. Over a period of time, a certain Saudi Arabian man kept phoning Ron. He wanted to sell to Ron the photos and movie film that had been confiscated. Finally, Ron decided to fly down to Nuweiba on the Red Sea, hoping this man could fly across from Saudi Arabia to meet him there. In vain, Ron tried to make himself understood to the person who answered the Saudis' phone. The Egyptian gentleman at the Nuweiba Hotel switchboard noticed Ron's difficulty in getting through. And this man, who spoke both English and Arabic fluently, we'll call him Mr. Sayadin. He offered his translating services and Ron gladly accepted. So for 4 days they rang, but each time the Saudi man was not in. At last Ron and his wife, Mary Nell, decided it was time to leave. "I've been praying about this," said Ron. "I now believe we should leave our maps and information with Mr. Sayedin. He's offered to help me get the photos. He says he'll go over there himself." "Thank God," exclaimed Mary Nell. "Ron, I have a map right here in my purse. I've been preparing this map, and I had no idea why I was preparing it. Let's go and see the man." That map of northwest Arabia was to prove of vital importance, because even the Saudis can't get accurate maps of that area. So they sat down with Mr. Sayedin and carefully they sketched the entire route, showing how to get to Jebel El Lawz from towns in both the north and the south areas. They marked all the wadis or dry riverbeds, because there were few roads in the area, and those rough wadis would need to be travelled in a 4-wheel drive vehicle. On the back of the map, Mary Nell sketched pictures of the drawings Ron had made years earlier, of the cows and bulls and the golden calf altar. She drew the 2 standing boulders with a solitary tree between them, which was positive identification of the holy precinct at the foot of the mountain. She drew everything Ron could remember which would identify the locations. The split rock, for example, out of which had come the water. They gave these to Mr. Sayedin. In such an isolated, untamed land with no landmarks or signs, these drawings would be imperative. Without them, he'd have no idea what to look for. They insisted that Mr. Sayedin keep all this information in strict confidence, and he agreed. And so that Mr. Sayedin would understand their purpose in getting the photographs, Ron told him about his other archaeological work, including Noah's Ark. It was felt that the more he understood, the better he would know what to look for and film. And to get Mr. Sayedin motivated, Ron offered to pay him a considerable fee and gave him $1,500 down payment. Meanwhile, another player was being prepared for the final act. We shall call this man Abu Hesham. It's not his real name, but we want to protect his identity for the present time. What follows is almost unbelievable, but I assure you, my friends, this is absolutely true. This man, living in Saudi Arabia, had received from a friend in the United States a videotape copy of a TV program featuring somebody discussing the discovery of Noah's Ark. After copying the tape onto another tape size to fit his VCR, he placed the original tape from the US in his camera bag to reuse in his video camera. About a year later, Abu Hesham went off to tour Egypt, taking with him 10 used videotapes to film his trip. Renting a car, he visited the traditional site of Mount Sinai around St. Catherine's Monastery in the so-called Sinai Peninsula. This was his chief interest in visiting Egypt. After several days exploring the region, he came away terribly disappointed. He knew this traditional site was not authentic. There was no evidence, nor did it fit the biblical description. On his way back, Abu Hesham checked into Mr. Sayedin's hotel just half an hour after Ron and Mary Nell had left. To his surprise, Mr. Sayedin began to rant and rave about this Mount Sinai in Arabia. Out came the map the Wyatts had given him that very afternoon. He told Abu Hesham about Ron Wyatt and made reference to Ron's involvement in Noah's Ark. Abu Hesham suddenly thought about the tape that had been sent to him from the United States 12 months earlier. He reached into his camera bag. Of the 10 used videotapes he had brought to film his trip, he had used 9. He pulled out the remaining unshot tape. He put it in his camera and pressed play. And then, in the eyepiece, was the bearded man from the program on Noah's Ark. Excitedly, he passed it to Mr. Sayedin. "Is this the man?" he asked. "That's him." Mr. Sayedin viewed it for only a few seconds and began to shout, "Yes, that's him. That's the man that just left here. That's the man who gave me this map only half an hour ago." The tape was of a TV program called The Good Life, in which Ron had appeared in February 1990. This was unbelievable. Both men were so shocked. Could all of this be coincidence? Only a coincidence. Taking the map from Mr. Sayadin, Abu Hesham headed back to Saudi Arabia. In his own car, he drove right to Jebel El Lawz and found the very site Ron and Mary Nell had marked on the map. Using the only videotape he had left, the one of Ron's TV program, he videoed and photographed everything possible. Arriving home, he sought out the spare copy he had made of that TV show, and with pen and paper noted the following: name, Ron Wyatt. Address, Nashville, Tennessee. By coincidence, can we say again, a friend had just moved to America, and to what area of that big country but the very same town, Nashville. Abu Hesham rang him. Ali, he called, will you do something for me? Please find a man in the same town where you are called Ron Wyatt. Find him in the telephone book. Call him. Tell him to phone me here in Saudi Arabia immediately. Ron called Abu Hesham, and he heard the man's amazing story. Not only that, this man wanted to give Ron all the video and photographs. Give them to him. As usual, the prayers were answered. We now have over 12 hours of video and about 400 photographs, Mary Nell told me the other day. For now, we must protect this man's real identity. He will be in grave danger if it is discovered that he has photographed this area, because the Saudis are now jealously guarding it. Larry Williams' book about Jebel El Lawz has been banned in Saudi Arabia. There was a big uproar in Saudi over the site because of the book, and now it's extremely dangerous for anyone to even try to get into the area. However, friends, we are privileged to have some video footage to show you on the discovery, some of the footage that was smuggled out of Saudi Arabia by Abu Hesham at the risk of his own life, and you're going to see this now.
Mount Sinai, where the law was written by God's own finger. Finally, we can see this majestic mountain where God's own presence once rested. Jebel El Lawz in northwest Saudi Arabia. In Galatians 4:25, the Apostle Paul tells us, "For this Agar is Mount Sinai in Arabia." Exodus 19:18, "And Mount Sinai was altogether on a smoke, because the Lord descended upon it in fire." Could this blackened peak be the result of the consuming fire of God's own presence resting upon it? In 1 Kings 19, verses 8 and 9, we read how Elijah came to Horeb and went into a cave. Here we see a very large cave just below the solitary tree which is between two massive granite boulders. As we view the holy precinct, the area at the foot of the mountain, we can see a large fence and a guard house, which was erected immediately after Ron Wyatt showed this site to a Saudi archaeologist in 1985. This fence follows along the line of 18-foot diameter boundary markers which Moses was directed to erect by God. This sign by the guardhouse states that this is an archaeological site passed by royal decree, and that it is unlawful to trespass, subject to penalty. And as we pan to the left, here we can see where the fence ends on the other side. And now, as we pan away from the holy precinct, we look out into the area of the camp of the Israelites. There are several archaeological remains still here, but this one is of particular interest for us. In Exodus chapter 32, we read of the golden calf and how Aaron fashions it. And in verse 5, "And when Aaron saw it, he built an altar before it, and Aaron made proclamation and said, 'Tomorrow is a feast to the Lord.'" There is little doubt that these are the remains of that very altar which Aaron built to the golden calf. When the Saudi archaeologist from Riyadh University, who went there with Ron in 1985, saw this, he was very excited. The 12 petroglyphs of cows and bulls captured his interest because they are found nowhere else in Saudi Arabia. The style of their horns and bodies is distinctly ancient Egyptian, the same style found in the temples and tombs of ancient Egypt. If indeed millions of people encamped in this area, we would expect to find artifacts. And here we see one of these artifacts, a broken section of a grinding stone or millstone. The biblical account of the Exodus tells us God provided manna from heaven, but it also tells us in Numbers chapter 11 verse 8 that they gathered it and ground it in mills and baked it. Unable to enter the holy precinct from the front and climb upon Mount Sinai, we now approach it from the backside, where the two large boulders with the solitary tree between them can be seen. Climbing the mountain here, we soon find ourselves on top of a large, sheltered plateau. Here we have a better view of the blackened peak. Panning the area, we find it to easily be large enough to accommodate the 70 elders who accompanied Moses up into the mountain at one point in time. The peak to the left is where the solitary tree is, but it cannot be seen because of our angle. And just ahead, over that ledge, lies the holy precinct. Looking down, we see the fence which follows along the bounds set by Moses, and just beyond that fence is part of the camp of the Israelites. Zooming in closer to the holy precinct, we can see the remains of an ancient foundation. Could this be the remains of the first tabernacle which Moses removed to the outside of the camp after the golden calf incident? Exodus 33 verse 7, "And Moses took the tabernacle and pitched it without the camp, afar off from the camp, and called it the tabernacle of the congregation." And directly adjacent to this foundation are the remains of an altar built of stone. Exodus 20:25, "And thou wilt make me an altar of stone. Thou shalt not build it of hewn stone, Panning further, we stop to look at the tracks made by the Bedouins' trucks before the fence was erected. This gives you a better idea of the size perspective of the enormity of this area. And here we see the guard building, an archaeological sign which we saw earlier from the front. Returning back to the foundation we saw earlier, the camera begins to pan outward where we will be able to see the location of the altar to the golden calf. Exodus 32:19. And it came to pass, as soon as he came nigh unto the camp, that he saw the calf and the dancing, and Moses' anger waxed hot, and he cast the tables out of his hands and brake them beneath the mount. Still visible today also is the stream bed which descended from the mountain to give the people abundant water for themselves and their flocks and herds. Preparing to leave, we can look down upon the backside of the mountain, and again we see the vast plain area. As we leave Mount Sinai, we travel along one of the wadis or canyons back in the direction of the Red Sea. Arriving on the opposite side of this mountain, we find an area which fits the biblical description of Rephidim, the last encampment of the Israelites before they reach Mount Sinai. Exodus 17:6. The Lord tells Moses, "Behold, I will stand before thee there upon the rock in Horeb, and thou shalt smite the rock, and there shall come water out of it, that the people may drink." And Moses did so in the sight of the elders of Israel. This scripture continues to tell of the Amalek attacking the people, and of Moses standing upon a hill with Aaron and Hur holding up his arms. Again, we can see that there is certainly enough area for a great battle to take place here. But the most incredible evidence for this site is the giant split boulder upon a hill with evidence that large streams of water flowed from it. The rocks still display the erosion pattern of tremendous amounts of water descending from this rock. And as we travel through the split in the boulder, we soon can see the channels cut in the rock from the water flow on the other side. And panning outward, we can see these channels continue out into the plain. After the battle, when Israel had defeated the Amalekites, the Bible tells us that Moses did something. As we go to Exodus 17, verse 15, and Moses built an altar and called the name of it Jehovah Nissi. Here are the remains of a very ancient altar, part of it fallen, perhaps from an earthquake or Bedouins looking for treasure inside. But enough is still intact to show it was indeed an altar, as it is not hollow inside, but solid all the way through. Panning to the left, we see the position of the altar and the rock at Horeb just a few hundred yards away, and to the left the high peaks of Mount Sinai. Also present here are some of the circular dwellings of the Israelites. Those still intact show that they were low, too low to stand up in, but of the size that a family could sleep in. We now leave Rephidim and the rock at Horeb, which can be seen here, and proceed in the direction along this wadi towards the Red Sea. We soon come upon another area which perfectly fits the biblical description of one of the stops of the multitude before they reached Rephidim. Exodus 15:27. And they came to Elim, where were 12 wells of water, and 70 palm trees, and they encamped there by the waters. The Saudis have recently walled up the wells to prevent debris from falling into them. Leaving Elim, we continue toward the Red Sea. And just up ahead, we can barely see the Gulf of Aqaba. As we continue our approach, the wadi or canyon seems so narrow from afar, but now it can be seen to be large enough for the vast multitude to have traveled through. And across the sea, we can see the large beach area on the Egyptian side. Just as the beach on the Egyptian side is certainly large enough to accommodate several million people, here we can see that this beach also contains a tremendous plain. In Exodus 14, verse 30, we read, Thus the Lord saved Israel that day out of the hand of the Egyptians, and Israel saw the Egyptians dead upon the sea shore. In 1984, when Ron and his sons were imprisoned here in Saudi, Ron directed his captors to this beach in a helicopter, where he showed them a Phoenician-style column on this beach with inscriptions in archaic Hebrew that said that King Solomon had erected this column in honor of Yahweh to commemorate the crossing of the Red Sea on dry land. Today, all that remains there is this marker noting the location of that column, and while we do not know where they have taken it, we feel sure it is protected and will be located soon. As we look out into the sea, we can see the end of the tongue of the underwater land bridge, and that it leads across to this very beach just beyond where the column once rested. Panning the beach, we also can see the restored remains of the ancient fortress we believe was Baal Zephon of the biblical account.
Now, friends, isn't that really something? There have been some extraordinary interventions of God in history, and for centuries there's been no evidence of these events. Now, for the first time, the evidence is found, just as what I believe is the nearing of the end. These have been preserved by God till the end of the last days to get the attention of the whole world. God's great attention getters, we could call them. Each contains a message for the end. Now, these miraculous interventions were, firstly, the great flood. Jesus says in Matthew 24, 37 to 39, that this is a sign for the people living just before Jesus returns. So is it not appropriate that the evidence for this should be found very close to this time? The second great intervention was Sodom and Gomorrah. Jude 7 tells us that it's a sign for the people living at the last times. Is it not appropriate then that after centuries of searching, now it should be found about the same time as Noah's Ark is found? The third great intervention was when God brought a superpower with its great pompous king to its knees, the world's mightiest army, in a battle in which not one of the other side died. In 1 Corinthians 10 verses 1, 2 and 11, it talks about the Israelites being brought through the Red Sea and says these things happened to them as examples to us upon whom the ends of the world are come. Is it not appropriate then that as we near this time again of history, that like Noah's Ark, like Sodom and Gomorrah, so the site of the Red Sea crossing now comes out to the sight of the world? The fourth great intervention was when God himself came down on a mountain and before a whole nation of people spoke and gave on everlasting stone his 10 great words, the 10 commandments. We'd certainly be better off if we took notice of those today, instead of our homes being armed fortresses and violence on the streets. If respect for God's laws was evident in our community, we'd be a much safer and happier place. But interestingly, in Hebrews 12, verses 18 to 21, and also verse 26, it tells us that at that time when God did this, he then shook the earth. But he says here that this time, just this once, I will not just shake the earth, I will shake the heavens also. And this is referring to the return of Jesus. So friends, suddenly these evidences of these past interventions are discovered all at once, just before Jesus is about to return, which will be the greatest intervention of all. He's now brought to the world suddenly the evidence of his greatest interventions of the past. I suppose he's saying, look world, I interrupted history here, and here, and here, and here. Now take notice, the evidence for these has now been discovered just as I'm about to interrupt history again for the greatest time of all. I think, friends, that there's something here for us to think about, don't you? These are times of great importance, and I believe these evidences are part of God's plan, where he says that in Jeremiah chapter 16 verses 19 to 21, the time is coming when the Gentiles, the unbelievers, are going to say, our fathers have taught us lies. And God is going to say, here I am showing you my hand and my might in history, just before I show you my great might finally. Well, may God bless you all, and may these, I hope that these evidences that you've seen are going to be a help to you in your personal life and in your sharing with other people the wonderful truths of God's Word. Because you know, if you know a friend, and this friend can be trusted to have told the truth in an habitual way, he's used to telling the truth, then you can trust him in what he tells you about the future, can't you? And if we realise that God's Word can be trusted, it can be taken literally, that God has a habit of telling the truth, there's no doubt in my mind, friends, that you can trust him for the promises that he makes for your life. You can trust him for the promises he is giving us now, that very soon there'll be an earth made new. Well, friends, if you want some more information on these subjects, here is Dead Men's Secrets. This is a book which involves the result of 12 years' research in over 30 countries around the world. It deals with the secrets of the ancient races and lost technology. And from the ocean floor, from the depths of the jungles of the Amazon, from the under the sands of the deserts around the world, very surprising things are being found by archaeologists, which we don't hear very much about. And there's an interesting pattern worldwide to a very high civilization in the past. Now, this book's available by contacting myself, And you'll find, I'm sure, many hours of wonderful adventure in discovery in this book, Dead Men's Secrets. Now there's the Ark Conspiracy. This deals with two subjects. As a matter of fact, the main subject, of course, is Noah's Ark. And the research, the scientific evidence, the arguments of the critics are dealt with one by one, and also the story behind the Ark discovery. This whole book really is more of a story than anything, although it does give out the scientific evidence. The story of the murder attempt, yes, believe it or not. The phone tappings, the betrayals, and also the wonderful miracles. The miracles that took place that showed there was more than a human hand involved in this whole matter. It's a fascinating story. Even people who don't read books normally have expressed the fact that they've enjoyed this, and they can't put it down until they've finished it. That's the Ark Conspiracy, the story of Noah's Ark. Now, for those of you who want more information on the Red Sea crossing, there's a couple of chapters about this here. The discoveries on the bottom of the sea, the Red Sea, Pharaoh's lost army, and also the secrets of the desert of Sinai in Arabia, the story of the discovery there. It's all told here in the Ark Conspiracy. There's another little book here which I haven't mentioned before, and this is Sting of the Scorpion. You know, the ancient civilizations believed that a dragon representing, or a serpent representing the devil, had taken control of the world. They also believed that a virgin's baby would fight the serpent, defeat him, and bring life, peace and happiness back to mankind. And the old star names and the star pictures that they drew were not at all invented to tell people's fortunes. No, far from it. They told the story of this drama. And later on, of course, astrology took over, and people have quite a wrong idea of why these star signs came about. This gives you the archaeological evidence for the original understanding of a gospel story that was known by the ancients and written on their star maps. Now, we also put out a newsletter quarterly, and so many people have expressed interest in knowing what's going to continue happening that we put out this newsletter. Here's just a couple of the issues. We have updates on all the discoveries we're involved in, plus other discoveries from the South Pole to the North and everything in between. Discoveries of ancient giants, discoveries of ancient technology, certain world events that have very great significance to us today. It's very, very interesting. We keep on updating information from these other books as new information comes to light. And the $25 subscription to this per year, it's a quarterly, helps to pay for our expeditions as well. So if you want to know more, if you want to help us as well, then the newsletter's one way. Thank you.
You've been watching a presentation by Jonathan Gray in the Surprising Discovery series. To receive regular newsletters, to inquire about available publications, or to book Jonathan as a speaker at your church fellowship or community group, write to Jonathan Gray, Post Office Box 3370, Rundle Mall, Adelaide, South Australia 5000.
Of all. So now God will bring out the evidence he has been keeping safe just for this time.